Over the last decade, stand-up comedy has never been more in demand. But though the art form is now bigger than ever, today's leading stars owe a debt to generations of comics who came before them. Here are some of stand-up comedy's all-time greats. In 2014, the hearts of millions of comedy fans were broken when the legendary comic Robin Williams died at the age of 63. Williams had become a much-loved Hollywood actor in the previous 3 decades, most notably in the drama Good Will Hunting, for which he won a Best Supporting Actor Oscar, and in the comedy classic Mrs. Doubtfire.
Daniel, hi.
Could you make me a woman?
Honey, I'm so happy.
But before his Hollywood stardom, Williams made his name as a stand-up, initially building his profile as a comic around San Francisco. Williams' mix of mania and melancholy gave him a broad palette, and his natural abilities as a character actor, impressionist, and all-around performer made him seem capable of anything.
There's the space shuttle! There's a space shuttle up there. It's so good to know if there's ever a nuclear war, there'll be 3 men in space going, "What was that noise?"
His abilities ultimately made him an international star, but as a stand-up, Williams had no equal.
I give the pigeons my methadone so they come back.
When the death of Jerry Lewis was announced in 2017, few could deny the incredible impact that the comic had on the whole of American entertainment. Best known for his partnership with the Rat Pack's Dean Martin, Lewis exuded physicality and a rubber-faced brand of clowning that had rarely been seen by American audiences. Moving from nightclubs to TV and eventually to Hollywood as both a star and a director, Lewis's innovations were underpinned by an entertainment pedigree. He emerged from a family with deep roots in traditional vaudeville, which explains how natural he was in front of a camera. But the true genius of Lewis was that he wasn't simply a two-dimensional stage persona. Lewis dazzled audiences with his hugely multifaceted personality, giving the impression that he was not just one man on stage.
What are you doing to the band?
Why don't you just sing a number? Let me worry about the band. They're under my jurisdiction. I got the baiting.
Baiting? The bait? Now let's laugh it up here.
Few are more recognizable in American entertainment than Bob Hope, whose name remains a byword for the professional American comic. Emerging, like Jerry Lewis, from vaudeville, Hope progressed from dance routines to comic roles in musicals to radio and movies to become the king of media by the early 1940s. But Hope's name also lives on because of his innovative stand-up routines. Hope differed from other stand-up comedians of his era because of his topicality. Whereas many comics toured sets of fixed material, from the 1930s onwards, Hope reacted to news and current events and tailored his act to provide satirical commentary on the world around him.
You heard the rumor they may draft women? Heard it, you probably started it.
This facet of his act would become a staple of stand-up comedy ever after, and Hope also pioneered the idea of writing his own jokes, leaving behind some 85,000 pages of work at the time of his death in 2003 at the age of 100. While many mid-20th century comics were trained in stagecraft from childhood, the trailblazing comic Phyllis Diller came to the art relatively late. She was already a housewife and mother of 5 children and successful as a newspaper journalist when she appeared on TV for the first time in 1958. At the time, Diller wasn't booked as a featured performer, but as a contestant on the long-running game show You Bet Your Life, hosted by the legendary comic Groucho Marx. As Diller explained to Marx and to the audience, though she already had a life carved out for herself, she was certain that she was good enough to be a professional comedian, and had already had her first nightclub bookings. Marx invited Diller to perform some of her material, and no one could deny Diller's natural comedic timing and her magnetic persona.
I hate the thrift flight. I mean, none of the costly extras, like landing gear.
An appearance in the early 1960s on The Jack Paar Show saw Diller reach an even greater audience and become a household name. Diller died in 2012 at the age of 95. Andy Kaufman almost single-handedly merged the two arts of stand-up comedy and performance art. Kaufman never told traditional jokes. Instead, his performances were characterized by seemingly banal routines, such as reading aloud from The Great Gatsby, which tended to make his audience laugh nervously. Kaufman also acted as strange characters, such as the unlikable lounge singer Tony Clifton, whom he claimed was not a character at all, but a real separate person in his own right.
I didn't ask you a question. If I ask you a question, you answer.
Kaufman died of lung cancer in 1984 at just 35 years old. But according to many of his fans, his apparent death was just another of the comedian's great stunts. Some claim that Kaufman faked his own death as a final subversion of fame and celebrity culture. However, no hard evidence of these claims has ever come to light. Modern comedians are generally, and perhaps rightly, growing increasingly suspicious of catchphrases, which proliferated in shows for the best part of the previous century. But there is no denying that Rodney Dangerfield hit upon something timeless when he decided to build his catchphrase around the idea that he got no respect from the world around him.
I don't get no respect from anyone. Well, last week my house was on fire. My wife told the kids, be quiet, you wake up Daddy.
Dangerfield's career-defining catchphrase wasn't a cheap gimmick. In fact, Dangerfield's claims of getting no respect signaled a blackly pessimistic worldview. His wife Joan told USA Today, Rodney believed that everyone, regardless of their age or circumstances, ends up getting hurt, betrayed, or taken advantage of. But more than anything, Dangerfield was an exceptionally talented and diligent writer who worked on his material like a master craftsman. The success that Steve Martin enjoyed as a stand-up comedian in the 1970s was unlike anything that the industry had seen before. Wowing audiences, Martin performed impressions, deployed props, and sang songs in a variety of styles, selling out 10,000-seater stadiums, while his comedy albums went multi-platinum.
Let me explain why I'm in bed to the audience. I'm looking for action.
Martin quit performing stand-up in 1981 just as his Hollywood career was about to hit its peak. Martin later claimed to have quit stage comedy due to depression, but in the years that followed, Martin enjoyed enormous big-screen success in movies such as Three Amigos, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and Father of the Bride, all remembered today as classic comedies. He eventually returned to stand-up in 2016 and continues to perform, having recently found great success in a double act with longtime collaborator Martin Short. Joan Rivers built her 6-decade career on exquisite one-liners that shocked audiences by saying the unsayable. She said of her own comedy, "I succeeded by saying what everyone else is thinking."
Because I love Montreal. It's like Paris, but you bathe.
In doing so, she pioneered the comedic art of purposefully making audiences uncomfortable. The comedian Arabella Weir described Rivers as a fearless performer, never afraid to craft jokes that used the tragedies of her own life as her material. Though seen as glamorous from the very start of her career, Rivers gave the impression of never caring what people thought of her, according to Weir. She led the way for such figures as Sarah Silverman and Ali Wong, and she showed how women in comedy could subvert stereotypes around how women should be seen and what women could talk about on stage. She died in 2014 at the age of 81. A force of nature when he first arrived in front of UK audiences in the 1970s, Glasgow-born Billy Connolly made comedic storytelling an art form. Surprisingly, Connolly never writes down his material or memorizes it. According to the Sunday Post, Connolly instead made his name sharing funny stories he knew, never realizing in the early days that other comedians had pre-written their shows.
The scene is a Roman Catholic primary school in Glasgow, and a teacher standing in front of the class.
Nor did Connolly become famous for telling typical jokes, but rather by trying to make audiences laugh as he would a drinking partner. Connolly said of his work, "When you're in a bar when people are coming out of work, you'll hear big belly laughs coming from them. Then you'll go home and watch a comedian on TV and you'll say, 'He's good,' but you'll not be laughing." Connolly explains that, rather than that of a typically polished stand-up comedian, the performing style that made him famous is nothing more than the kinds of funny stories that ordinary people tell each other all over the world. Richard Pryor might have been a mediocre comic if he had followed the career path that first propelled him to the stage in the late 1960s. The comedian made his first television appearances on such big-name showcases as The Ed Sullivan Show. He performed a brand of family-friendly comedy pioneered by black comedians such as Bill Cosby, before taking a lucrative contract performing for audiences in Las Vegas. But frustrated by the identity being foisted upon him, Pryor abruptly walked off stage during one performance, bent on reimagining his act in a form truer to his lived experience. Pryor had been raised in abject circumstances, taking a string of low-paid jobs after being expelled from school at the age of 14. After leaving the stage, the comedian re-emerged as the ultimate chronicler of Black American life, whose fearlessness and taboo-breaking material redefined stand-up comedy forever. Unashamed in delving into the darkest recesses of his own damaged psyche, Pryor crafted bits from even the most painful elements of his life, including notorious stories about his private life, which, at the height of his fame, had already made headline news.
And there was an old dope dealer. I used to follow him around for dope.
He was honored for his contribution to the craft in his own lifetime, winning the inaugural Mark Twain Prize for American Humor in 1998. Pryor died of a heart attack in 2005 at the age of 65. The late, great George Carlin died just months before receiving his own Mark Twain Prize in 2008, but by then, the comedian's legacy was already assured. Known to viewers of all ages as the sage time traveler Rufus in the Bill and Ted movie franchise, Carlin was most respected for his skills as a stand-up, and for his singular brand of morally outraged and hypocrisy-adverse social commentary.
Only a nation of unenlightened half-wits could have taken this beautiful place and turned it into what it is today.
Dubbed the Dean of Counterculture Comedians, Carlin's anti-authoritarian outlook made him the William S. Burroughs of stand-up, whose radical worldview was nevertheless tempered and made digestible by his natural joke-writing ability and charismatic performances. One of Carlin's most famous bits, 7 Words You Can't Say on TV, is a masterful lampooning of the duplicity of censorship and the external forces that enforce it. The bit is representative of Carlin's ability to deconstruct the absurdity of the unsaid rules that govern our lives. Honored after his death by such heavy-hitting comedians as Joan Rivers and Jon Stewart, Carlin continues to have a profound influence over generations of comics. The era-defining sketch comedy Chappelle's Show made Dave Chappelle a household name in the US and beyond in the early 2000s. Back then, Dave Chappelle was also well-regarded as a stand-up. His classic specials saw the comedian offer incisive social critiques on contemporary issues and race in America, offered through a likable stage persona.
Black people are very afraid of the police. That is a big part of our culture. No matter how rich you are, how old you are.
Then, at the height of his fame, Chappelle vanished, turning down a reported $50 million contract to continue making Chappelle's Show and retreating to Yellow Springs, Ohio. There, Chappelle largely avoided the public eye for the best part of a decade. He cited a variety of reasons for leaving in an interview with Oprah, including the stress of the job.
I'm telling you, I was incredibly stressed out. Love is like a nutrient, and I was deficient on vitamin love.
He eventually returned to the stage full-time in 2013. Chappelle has been prolific since his return to stand-up, racking up 6 Netflix specials between 2017 and 2021. At the same time, his recent subject matter has seen him become a more controversial figure than ever before. In 2019, Chappelle accepted the Mark Twain Prize for American Humor, solidifying his reputation as one of stand-up comedy's all-time greats.